Hi, welcome to the British Motorcycling Group podcast. I'm your host, Ian Richardson, and you're listening to the best motorcycling podcast in the world, probably. So today I'm thrilled to introduce Richard, who, along with his girlfriend Eva, has recently returned from an amazing adventure around Central Asia. So, hi, Richard.
Hey Ian, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks, mate. Good.
So, what's this adventure you've been on? Tell us a little bit about it. When did it start? When did it finish? Where have you been?
Cool. So we started off in May. So I guess for context, Eve and I are from New Zealand. So we flew to the UK. We bought some motorbikes. That in itself was not without its challenges.
Okay.
Um, but basically we set off. Yeah, in May we traveled through I think 24 countries, around 30,000 kilometers. Apologies, I'm not sure what that is in miles, but it's I think it's maybe like 17 at a total guess. But
Yeah, it's a long way.
yeah,
You wouldn't
man.
want to
And so
walk it,
we're
would you? But so
pardon me?
you wouldn't want to walk it. It's a long
No, 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 exactly. Although we did see a lot of people cycling a similar route, and
way.
honestly, mate, those people are just on a different level. But yeah, no, it was great. So 24 countries, basically took us from the UK through Europe into Turkey, up into Georgia, Russia, down into Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, did this big loop through the stands up into Russia, and then we rode across Russia to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and then back to the UK, through Europe again.
And when did you start that?
So I think it was May, mid-May we started. Yeah, yeah.
Mid-May. So you judged the weather to be the hottest but the driest, hopefully.
That was the plan. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the initial plan was to get to Mongolia.
Right.
And so it was really important for us to sort of get the seasons right, especially as well being in Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. Those are countries that you probably don't want to be in the middle of winter. Russia as well,
Yeah.
was a concern being in Russia. I guess in sort of like late September was. Yeah, obviously, it can get pretty cold there. So yeah, it was intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what bikes? Tell me, you said you bought bikes and you came to flown to the UK and you
Mhm.
bought the bikes here and you had some problems. Tell us about those bikes and what were the problems? What were the issues that arose when you're trying to get these bikes?
Sweet. Well, I guess so my bike that I got was a Tenere 700. Bought it off a guy, super lovely guy, really nice bike, like was very happy with it. Eva's one, so she got, I guess, the older Tenere, which was the XT660Z,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is yeah, the 660 single cylinder.
Hmm.
And I knew that was going to be a bigger bike, but figured she would probably be okay with it. I mean, to be honest, like most of the stuff we did on this trip wasn't really technical riding.
No.
Although there was definitely sections that we did that were a bit more serious.
Uh-huh.
But basically, I went up north. I can't remember exactly where it was. Maybe around Manchester, I picked this bike up from, and just it was one of these ones like, we didn't want to spend a lot of time messing around with like finding bikes once we were over here. We kind of just wanted to hit the ground running, order in parts, because obviously
Yeah.
there were things that we wanted to do, like, new bearings, etc. So we ordered all those parts and went up, picked the bike up, and it was just a bit of a lemon, like there was things like, the front axle pinch bolts were completely stripped. Like it was not a safe bike to be riding. So yeah,
Okay.
I guess there was, I had to sort of fix that up. Yeah, basically, it was one of those bikes. I'm sure you've probably had them where every single bolt was just fused. Everything was over torqued. Anything this guy had touched basically was a nightmare. But yeah,
No
basically
offense
these
if
are
you're listening,
yeah, if you're
but
listening.
you're a shit mechanic.
But yeah, basically, so fixed it up, made it, reasonable and not unsafe, sold that, and got her a XT660R, which is, I guess, the smaller version,
Yeah.
same engine, but smaller
Mm,
bike.
mm.
And that was really the bike that I had wanted to get for her the whole time. So it actually worked out really well.
Right. And
Yeah.
was this an eBay or Facebook marketplace or was it friend of a friend? How did you get to know about these?
So both of these bikes were Facebook Marketplace. Well, actually, no, yeah, they were, but my one I saw on like a UK Tenere 700 owners
Right,
um
yeah.
yeah page, which was cool. But yeah, I guess look, lesson learned. Yeah, it wasn't the end of the world. The insurance was an interesting one because we maybe naively, I mean, in New Zealand, insurance isn't mandatory. You don't have to have it.
It's
So
the
coming,
same all over. Well, lots of places. It's like
yeah,
what?
I know. But coming over here, we just could not fathom that. So basically, for us coming over here, we had to live in the country for 6 months before they would give
Because
us
you've got to
insurance.
have an address to register for you. They'll only register UK residences, won't they? I guess.
Yeah, so we had all that. We had a UK address.
Oh, okay.
I'm a UK citizen. I was born
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Scotland. But basically, if you haven't been living here for the past 6 months, they just won't insure you. So that was pretty tough. Like we, in the end, to be honest, and I don't
yeah.
know if I should be saying this.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just had, we
Anyway,
had
you
to
got
lie
around
about
it
it.
somehow. Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
But yeah, it was enough to get us on the road. I mean, by the time we got to sort of like Turkey, we were just buying insurance at the border anyway. So really, it
yeah.
was just something so we could be legal in Europe. But yeah.
So before we look at that journey and how you got down to Turkey, which route you took, etc., what got you guys into bikes and riding, and when?
So I got into motorbikes pretty early on. I don't know what initially, I don't know why I really wanted to do it, but I knew that my dad had ridden motorbikes when he was younger. I've got three siblings, so we're a family of six, and he was no longer riding motorcycles, but I knew I really wanted to do it, and I think I was maybe like 12 or 13, and I started like strategically leaving like motorcycle books around the place, and
Yeah,
um,
you do.
yeah. Oh, Dad, it would be great. It'd be so much fun. And then I knew he went out and he bought himself an old KTM 520 EXC. So it had supermoto wheels and basically enduro wheels.
Yeah,
And I knew that, like, when that happened, I was like,
it's
oh, I love
happening.
that. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, eventually he bought me a Kawasaki KDX 200, which is a pretty big bike for a 14-year-old,
Yeah.
It was solid. And I remember so vividly the first time we ever took it out to go for a ride. Like it wasn't like a, hey, let's go down the road. It was, okay, we're off to do a 30-kilometer like enduro trail ride. Let's do it. Yeah.
Wow.
I did the whole thing in first gear, mate. I was terrified. But it was awesome. I loved it. Yeah, it was great. And then as time passed, like it sort of my sister started riding, and yeah, just the whole family got into it. So it was a really cool, I guess, like family thing for us to do.
An amazing place to ride as well, I would imagine. You know,
Yeah, there's a lot of really good riding in New Zealand. Yeah, a lot of it, particularly so Auckland, there's a lot of sand-based stuff and a lot of like farm trails down in Wellington, which is the south of the North Island. It's like clay forestry trails, so it's like it can be
okay.
really like technical and slippy.
Yeah.
But that's also really fun as well, You just got to
Right.
learn to love that stuff, I think.
Yeah.
The first time you
Yeah.
hit it, you're like, oh,
So you're on the North Island, and I think a lot of people, when of course, we all know about New Zealand, and as British people, we still feel it's British. I'll just speak for most people. We do. Whether, haters come on and say we're independent since 1890, fine, I know, but we still think of you as us.
Mm,
So all a lot of people know is, well, the North Island's quite warm. The higher up, the warmer it gets. And the
mm.
South Island's like England, so don't go there because it's cold. And that's when people say, I don't think it's quite that simple, but yeah, in the middle, the bottom of the north and the top of the south is pretty temperate, like here. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, an amazing place with. And I think the great thing about it is that although it's pretty similar size to the UK, the difference in weather on that, north to south gives you such a tremendous variation of experiences. So yeah, great place to come from. And I guess those trials and doing it right from 14 with your dad also gives you that that much needed experience to even or the confidence to think about doing a trip like what you've just done.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously count myself as like super lucky and privileged to have that, as a kid. And I guess like, I continued riding through, I guess, my whole life, right? I got into road bikes when that was sort of like, a bunch of mates and we'd go
Yeah,
out and we'd do stupid things on the twisty roads and push ourselves probably a little bit too hard. And
like you do.
yeah. But I wouldn't say I'm like I wouldn't say I'm a fantastic rider to be honest or anything like that. Like I'm very I think a mediocre rider, and mechanically, I think that was like, yeah, mechanically was probably the biggest challenge was like getting myself ready so that I sort of felt confident that if something broke, on the
Yeah.
like, could I do anything about it? And like, obviously, there are things that, if I had a catastrophic engine failure, I probably wasn't in a position to fix that. But yeah, it was kind of nice, like self-educating and like, I guess preparing the bikes as well for a trip like that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you chose those Yamahas,
Mhm.
was that a deliberate thing, or had you researched it and thought we'll get similar bikes, and so we'll get them early, and then we can get things like chains and tires and things that might go wrong. We can specify them for that bike. Is that the reason you did that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I knew that the Yamaha platform was pretty reliable, They're not super high strung engines. Like, I most of the bikes I've had have been KTM's. And I felt more comfortable with the Yamaha on this trip.
Too. Sorry to
But
KTM owners, but yeah,
yeah. But yeah, that was it. I mean, we just replaced all the perishables before heading out. So, brake pads, bearings, chain sprockets, cush drive rubbers in some cases.
yeah,
Um, yeah, new tires, just things that were, they would break. And for the most part, like all that stuff lasted, we did a
yeah,
new chain and sprockets on both the bikes once we got to Poland, once those parts became a little bit more available.
yeah.
There was fixes we had to do on the road. There was a few crashes, so there was,
Oh, really?
self-inflicted repairs that had to be done, but nothing that kind of like broke on its own, if that makes sense. The bike was
Yeah,
really
yeah.
solid.
Nothing fell off and broke while you were just riding along.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah.
Great. So what when you set off from London, did you from
Yep.
the UK? And
Mhm.
what how far ahead? I'm interested to hear about like how you planned accommodation. What was your accommodation? Were you camping? Were you in Airbnbs, B&Bs, what? And what route did you take through Europe?
Mhm. So I think we didn't do a lot of planning. I mean, I think for a trip that's 6 months long, you just can't. There's no way that you can plan for 6 months worth of travel. I mean, maybe some people can, but we were motivated
I
in that.
can't. No,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you're wrong.
exactly. And it, and you lose the flexibility. Like if you're like, oh, we've got to be in this place in a week's time, but somebody,
Or we
you
lose
do
our
a local.
deposit and we can't afford it, or then we can't get anywhere else. You don't want that, do you? No.
No, no, no. So we camp a lot. We bought a pretty nice tent. I mean, we do a lot of hiking back in New Zealand, so we already had a lot of the lightweight kind of gear, if
Oh,
that
okay.
makes sense, which was super helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so we tent probably about 50-60% of the time. Maybe more than that. And but yeah, so I guess we went down into France, spent a couple of days in sort of the northeastern part of France. It was really wet. The
Oh,
first two
was it?
weeks riding through Europe were the most rain we saw in the entire trip for sure.
Well, you
But
certainly left a very wet summer behind you in Northern
yeah,
Europe,
I
didn't you?
know,
Yeah,
I
it was an
know.
awful summer.
Yeah, good thing it didn't last. I mean, for
Yeah.
us, for you guys, yeah.
Yeah, you were going south, yeah.
But it was good. Yeah, we managed to catch a little bit of the Black Forest in Germany. We had a
Oh,
friend who
beautiful.
lived in Austria, so we went out and saw him. Did a bit of hiking through there. And I think for us, like coming from New Zealand, like we haven't got like I think you're lucky if you see a building that was sort of like late 1800s. For
Yeah.
us, that's like, oof, that's historic. That's a heritage building right there. So
Yeah.
I think we were sort of like mouths open riding through Europe and even France. We sort of had this policy that we didn't want to hit the motorways. We just wanted to ride on like the smaller roads through the smaller villages.
Mm.
And yeah, like it was awesome. I mean, there's a real vibe through some of these small little towns, and we
Yeah.
loved it.
Some beautiful places, aren't they? And
Yeah, there really are. We spent a couple days like hanging out at a church just because it was raining so much, but it was awesome. It was great.
talking about churches, I was riding in the States and a friend of mine said, "Oh, we're going to go past this historic place. Are you interested?" I said, "Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely." And he said, it's almost 100 years old." And
Oh wow.
I said, because he was proud of that. And so I didn't want to be dismissive, but
Yeah.
I am, an Englishman. So I said, I'm not being funny, but my grandma's house is older than that. And, you know, and the church in my village was built in 1050,
Whoa.
just
Yeah,
to put it out there.
mate, that's incredible.
1050. I mean, that's just it's just ridiculous, isn't it? It's insane.
It is.
We're a
It is.
thousand years old. So just want to put that there. And they were like, what?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is can be unusual for people from newer settled countries in the last couple of hundred years to find places that are 5, 6, 700 years old. It's like insane, really.
It is. I mean, we totally appreciate it. It boggles our mind.
Yeah,
It really does. But it's great. Yeah, it's really cool.
yeah.
And I think it made like even though that first part of the trip, like we weren't riding through like I wouldn't say it was like seriously interesting riding, but like it was a real experience for us.
Yeah,
Like we really
of course.
appreciated that. As we sort of made our way south, and yeah, it was really awesome.
That's amazing. So, of course, with the open borders of the Schengen region, you're not actually having any border issues. Once you get into France, you're free right till you get to the edge of, I guess, Turkey.
Slovenia, I think you
Or
start
Slovenia, is
crossing
that the
board.
first? Once you get out of the EU, your first one, I guess.
I guess Croatia. I can't remember if we crossed the border going into Croatia. I could have a look at my passport.
No,
Definitely
it's right. But
Bosnia.
yeah, I'm just,
Definitely
you
Bosnia.
do have the freedom of going like through France and Belgium and Holland and Germany and Austria without really you wouldn't really know you're changing unless you saw the sign or the tarmac changes color or whatever,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah. So that first, did you have any issues with borders when you first moving in?
We were pretty easy, mate. Yeah, it was as you say, like, once we got into France, it was pretty easy going. We had no problems. So yeah, but I mean, one country that we really enjoyed was Slovenia. I think that's where we started to get really excited because, we went to like the Socha Valley, we had a recommendation. We had no idea about Slovenia as a place to go. It wasn't really on our radar. And then
Hmm.
we met this German guy at a gas station. He was like, "Oh, you have to go to this area." He made a little bit of a route for us, and off we went. And mate, some of the riding there is absolutely fantastic. You're going over these like nice little like mountain passes, and
Wow.
yeah, just gorgeous, gorgeous riding. If anyone like, and the thing is, it's so close to Europe, But I appreciate there's so much good riding in Europe. Having come back through and done like Switzerland and the Northern Italian Alps, and like you guys are just so lucky here, man. It's unreal.
Yeah, I know. We had a very close friend who moved over to Canada when they were 15
Mhm.
and came back in the sort of 40s to work for 2 years. Um, and they didn't want to go back. They said, we've made our lives in Canada and our families are there and things, but you don't know how lucky you are that you're
Mm.
like probably a 50 quid plane ride from anywhere, in a 1 hour, 2 hours max to the
Yeah,
sun, and so many different, like 30 countries within 2 hours. You've no idea how lucky you are.
yeah.
And we do forget that, where we are. We forget that the location is just insane, really, that you can be
Mm.
in so many places so quickly and so many different cultures. It's not just the distance, you know,
Yes.
languages and cultures and food and roads and everything. And I guess in Slovenia, you're just beginning to leave Europe and what's familiar
Mhm.
apart, to you, and you're starting to separate into sort of the Eastern vibe a little bit there, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think that's probably why we started to get quite excited. Because even being from New Zealand, we have an idea of what French people like, what French culture is like. Same with Germany, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, of
Whereas
course.
like we were venturing into countries where we really didn't know a lot about, So
Mm.
that was really exciting, and I think that's also where we started to just come across these like acts of generosity that just came out of nowhere, like we were basically standing on the side of this like cliff and we were looking out, it was awesome, and this couple came up and they said, "Hey, like what are you guys doing? And do you want to come stay at our house?" And we did, and it was great,
Crazy.
and I think that like we saw a lot of that on this trip, and I think for us that's kind of where it started happening, which was great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very common thing that you hear, not just about people traveling by motorcycle, but of course, when you're a bit more vulnerable and you're a bit more, people will approach you, but I think because of that psychological element of your vulnerability, they'll come and say, "Wow, what are you doing?" Whereas if you were in a car, they may or may not think to do that. It's
Mm.
sometimes, when you either got biker gear on or you're on a bike, it's like, "Oh, wow," because like you've really come all that way, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And you're right. I find, the generosity of people is just immense, and it's just so heartwarming.
Mm.
I've often said, long before I ever rode anywhere, um, that travel and meeting other people is the best possible way to open your mind to other people.
Yeah.
You know, you won't find many racists amongst people that's traveled and found beautiful people that will do anything for you before themselves, even
Yeah.
for nothing. Don't expect anything back. It's
Yeah.
just so we're all the same, and it's so lovely, and
It
it's
is,
great
man.
to hear that you experienced that as well.
Oh, look, I mean, I could just rattle off a list of all the times that we experienced that. And I think in this particular instance, with this couple in Slovenia, like there's also that camaraderie of motorcyclists. Like in this case, these guys were motorcycle
Yeah. Oh,
bike
yeah.
riders, and that's another thing we really came across a lot of as well, especially in places like Tajikistan and Russia. You know, there's really active motorcycle communities in those countries, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Russia in particular. I mean, it's actually insane.
Yeah. I mean, there's huge clubs, isn't there, out there?
Yeah.
Owners clubs for different brands, and yeah, it's massive in Russia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just this awesome open door policy where they'll just, they'll take anyone and, they're really excited. But I'm skipping ahead. I'm skipping ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry. So you've gone through sort of into Eastern Europe, and you're heading towards Asia,
We're-
I guess.
Yeah, so that's basically it. Yeah, we ended up riding through Croatia. We did the Trans-European Trail in Croatia, which was fun. Eva had a little off at that point, got a puncture in her radiator and a bent front disc.
Right.
So I plugged that up with a bit of metal putty, which
Right.
because we were on the top of this hill, like the sun was going down. We'd met this other group of riders who were like, "Oh, guys, like the trail gets way worse that way," and we were like, "Ah!" And so,
Oh, yeah,
yeah, so I
yeah,
did a bit of a patch job, and then we fixed that up in Sarajevo in Bosnia. So we spent a few days there. Awesome city, loved Sarajevo.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then we carried on into Bulgaria, basically, across Serbia, went into Bulgaria, had to wait there's an amazing motorcycle campsite there called Motor Camp Bulgaria. They were awesome. We put new tires on the bikes at that point. Had to wait maybe a few days because I'd lost my wallet in the UK like 2 days before we left. So I was waiting for like driver's license and stuff to show up, which happened, which was good. And then we cruised into Turkey. Yeah, went to Istanbul.
Right. So you went through the Bulgaria Turkey border north of Istanbul, and then drove down through it into Istanbul.
That's the one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And how was that? How was that crossing? And you know,
That was probably the first hard border crossing for us. I mean, it wasn't super hard, but it was just like, I guess maybe we were a bit naive. We didn't have cash on us. There were things we had to pay for at the border. And we actually met this really lovely motorbike rider. I can't remember where he was from. Maybe he was Polish, but he lent us some money. You know, he was like, yeah, well, I mean, because otherwise we're gonna have to turn around, go back, and it was gonna be a
yeah.
nightmare. Super nice guy. I think he lent us like 50 euros or something like that.
Oh,
And then
wow.
I'll meet you at the gas station down the road. And we were like, cool, because we obviously wanted to pay him back. And then went down to the gas station down the road and he wasn't there. And we couldn't find this
Oh,
for the
no way.
life
You've
of
done
us.
that on purpose, haven't you?
No, I don't know. I don't
Maybe. I mean,
know.
maybe it's just like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
maybe it
Yeah,
was.
that's
Maybe it
on
was.
you. Yeah. And you're panicking, and he's thinking, I just won't be there. Then they won't have to pay me back. Bless him.
Honestly, I've never thought about that. Maybe that was what happened. I hope
Yeah.
that's what
Maybe I
happened.
just, think very positively all the
Yeah.
time. But yeah,
Well, I mean, if he's listening to this, like, and he'll know, like, please hit us up. We owe you 50 euros. Like, we would love to pay you back.
plus interest.
But yeah, just one of those ones, mate, you know?
So
But
you
yeah, no, I
bought,
mean,
sorry, you bought
um,
insurance. Did you need to buy insurance
yeah,
for Turkey? Yeah.
yeah, so that's where we started. And it wasn't crazy expensive. Like, we'd heard from some people it was going to be expensive. It wasn't. It was like 20 euros or something.
Yeah. I think it's
Um,
like, yeah, it's not too much, is it?
yeah. And unfortunately, Turkey's one of these countries, like, we actually really didn't get into the depths of Turkey. We were working on a bit of a time limit because we were actually planning to meet my dad, my uncle, and my sister's partner in Tajikistan, in Dushanbe. They were going to fly in, they were going to rent some
Right.
hotels, they're going to ride the Pamir Highway with us. So we did have a bit of a time commitment, and I think like Turkey in itself, or at least from our eyes, Turkey was a country that deserved its own dedicated trip, you know.
Yeah.
There's so much to do there. Like, we had an endless list of things that we wanted to do and see. So I think we just kind of were like, okay, well, we'll spend a couple days in Istanbul. We'll put it on the back burner and we'll just hustle through to Georgia.
Maybe next time. It's a beautiful, beautiful country.
Mm.
I'm blessed to have a house in Turkey,
Oh, nice.
and we've had it for 20 years, and
Mm.
it's right on the beach, and it is the nice. I mean, honestly, we go maybe well at least 5 times a year,
Awesome.
maybe more. And the neighbors are the most beautiful people. They're friendly, they're supportive, they're encouraging, they do anything for you. They'll always put you first.
Mm.
I can't speak more highly, not just because you're listening, hopefully, because I send them this link, all my neighbors, but honestly, they're so nice. And yeah, you've got to have your wits about you like everywhere, but
Mm.
nice people, massively fast growing country, and I think it's a bit of a contrast between the cities and when you get out and you start heading east. But if people expect it to be this Middle Eastern sort of, and then they go, especially somewhere like Istanbul or Izmir, and it's like, wow, it's so
Yeah.
modern, it's insane. It really is amazing. So yeah, I would say to anybody, if you've got an opportunity, um, you need to spend a couple of weeks there.
Yeah.
So much to see in such a huge country.
It is. It's massive, you know?
Massive, yeah. So yeah, maybe next time, Richard, eh?
Oh, look, I have every intention of going back. You know, there are really some iconic roads that I want to ride there, like D915. There's
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember the name of this particular canyon that you can go down, but it just yeah, it sounds incredible. And yeah, as I say, like I think it's totally worth a trip on its own, and it's doable from Europe. You know, like it's not
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
so yeah, I'm sure I'll get back there at some point. And I think that was also the thinking was, okay, we're not that far from Europe yet. We can get back here easily. Whereas like the countries further east, like how likely are we to go back there in the short to mid-term? Probably not for
Yeah.
a time, you know?
Yeah. It's people sometimes refer to it as, I mean it is Asia Minor, it's Anatolia, but it feels like you say, it's familiar enough to be able to get back and near enough, 3 days riding, you can be there, even
Yeah.
less,
Yeah.
if you wanted to. So yeah, good. And so you headed from Turkey into Georgia,
Yep.
yeah, and you can't. So I know that you've got to go into Georgia. You can't go into Armenia direct either. I think that's something I learned from my last week's guests
Yeah.
who went to Armenia. They're there now, actually, but they couldn't go straight to closed border. They had to go into Georgia, then across to Armenia because
Yeah.
they had a bit of an issue at the border. They got turned away at the border. You should listen to that podcast where they got all the documents out ready to be going into Georgia and queued up and whatever, God knows what. And then when they got there, they were at the wrong border. They were at something like, Tajikistan it's like, oh, it's 30 miles that way. And they were like, what? We're not even going there, So the sat nav they said that their sat nav failed and said that Google Maps was about 20 years out of date.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
put the wrong border. So
Oh mate, it happens. Like we had a similar one. We ended up at the wrong border in Uzbekistan, and it was
really,
I mean, it was actually amazing. Like it was such a cool place to travel, and like this particular region. And we were like, ah, well, whatever. We'll just turn around and ride back through it, no problem. But it totally happens. It's
yeah.
and like you can do all the planning in the world, but like on a trip like this, like you'll always have those little curveballs where you're like, whoops, like didn't know that. You can't know everything.
No, no, absolutely.
Um,
No.
yeah,
And if you do know everything, it's probably going to change anyway. So what you
yeah,
thought you knew has changed. So, these things, the sort of geopolitical situation, things change all the time, don't they?
exactly. But I mean, there's still things like like the amount of people that I met on this trip that were like, oh, we're going to ride to say like Azerbaijan, and we're going to ship the bike across because we don't want to go to Russia. And it's like, well, good luck with that. Like that's going to be really challenging, you know.
That should be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish there was some sort of like, and maybe this exists, but maybe there's like some place you can go and see like the state of like all the land borders, in the world, and like what routes are feasible, and like I feel like that would be a hugely useful traveler's tool. And we never really found a good place where we could find like I guess like the open, closed, locals only, international like border status of like everywhere
Yeah.
in kind of a relatively easy to access place. But yeah, maybe it's there. I mean, if you
Maybe.
know, please reach out to me and tell me because I will do another trip like this and I'd love to know.
Yeah, definitely. I know that Horizons Unlimited has a lot of stuff like that on there, and I look at that a lot, and I'm
Mm,
sure that a lot of people do. I don't. They may have a file. I don't know. I do look through them. I don't know whether there's an up-to-date one, but yeah, absolutely, that would be a really, really good thing,
mm.
really good resource for people.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
you tell us about when you left Turkey. You had this sort of relatively quick get out to Turkey because you were heading and you were going to meet up with your dad and family,
Hmm.
and you headed into Georgia initially.
Yeah, Georgia's an amazing country. I mean, I've been there before, and it's just like the food's amazing. The people are really lovely, like we said, in some gorgeous places, and there's really interesting like geographic features as well. Like you head up to the Savinity region, up into Ushguli, like they have these like look, I guess you would call them like mountain villages. I think Ushguli is like the highest populated mountain town. It's quite touristy now,
Right.
but it's still totally worth seeing. And there are a lot of these towns sort of like dotted around it. There's really good riding up there, man. Like it's not super technical off-road. Like
Oh,
it's kind
just
of just like
enjoyable and
it
challenge.
is. Yeah, yeah. It's awesome. Big flowy stuff and yeah, it's great. Like thoroughly enjoyed that Georgia. We went out to the Tusheti region. We did a road called the Arable, no, not the Arable Pass. The road is out to Amalo, the Abano Pass, sorry. Um, and that was sick. Yeah, that was really cool. That was kind of one that was on our tick list. We had a bit of a collision up there. It was honestly like mostly my fault. But like so the Habano Pass is one of these roads like once again not super technical, just gravel. There's a few river crossings and stuff like that. But like it's one of these ones where like there's no guard barrier on the left-hand side. If you go over that, it's game over,
Mm,
and there are like, there are memorials all along that road, from I would assume, 30, 40 years ago or whatever, when the road was actually in really rough conditions.
right.
But yeah, we had a really close moment. Eva went through this river crossing, kind of like, and just like went up, stopped, and so I went in after her, and she kind of just lost her balance, and the bike sort of tipped in
Oh,
front of me, and we had this collision, and
oh no.
luckily neither of us went over the edge, or it wasn't looking like that. But the basically the bracket that held her clutch onto the handlebars was completely snapped.
Because it's cast
So
aluminium, isn't it? So they tend
exactly,
to so
exactly.
easily break. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, okay, cool, like all good. Like I pulled out the metal putty, started to like, fuse this thing together again to at least get us out of the way.
And
And
did that work?
yeah, well, yeah, it did. It did after a wee bit of while. But we had these big boulders that were rolling down the hill, like boulders probably the size of like your torso, just like bombing down
Well,
this hill.
I'm visualizing like Indiana Jones type scene now.
It was high pressure, man. Like, there was like I was really trying to go as quick as I could, and like this guy he rolled up at one point, he was like, "You can't be here, like you've got to go." And we were like, "We're trying," but
Yeah, I
like she's got
know.
no clutch, and
Like,
like yeah, and eventually managed to like suss it and rode further up the road and figured out what was going on. There had basically been a small slip, and these diggers were just scooping all the rocks off the road and just lobbing them off the side, and we were just
yeah,
getting
it's
underneath
not a
it like,
natural phenomenon. It's
no.
actually they're throwing them at you.
Exactly, exactly. So,
Oh,
I mean, that was a bit of fun. Yeah, obviously it wasn't a perfect fix, and it was a bit kind of dodgy until we managed to get to Tajikistan. We got it welded properly, but it was
oh, did
yeah,
you get it welded, aluminium welded? That's brilliant. So,
yeah. Is it aluminium or is it cast?
oh, they might be cast like a cast alloy, but you can weld them. Yeah, I just
Yeah,
wondered
yeah, yeah.
because I thought, how are you going to end up with that? Where are you going to get that from in Tajikistan without
Yeah.
ordering it? I don't know.
Well, we tried to order this. This is classic, right? But we tried to order in a part to my dad, who was like, "Yep, sweet, no problem." It arrived, but the guy had sent the wrong part number and basically showed up, and it was so we were like, "Oh my God, really?" Like, but yeah, I mean, it was all good, I must say, and I'll probably come back to this later on, but like the resourcefulness of people in these regions is completely unparalleled. Like, it's not like back in New Zealand and I'm sure probably in the UK and Europe where it's like, okay, well, we'll just order in a new part. Like they actually still fix things
Things,
and
yeah,
they're just fantastic, like smart people used
definitely.
to solving problems. And I mean, that was
That,
another example of that.
that, Richard, is a very familiar thing, not just on these podcasts, because as you know, these are relatively new, but in from my experience of sort of Turkey and Eastern Europe, and um, people, because things are more expensive and money's too tight to mention in many cases, you've got to fix things. You can't just, we don't live in a throwaway society like we do.
Yeah.
And so, for example, cars are so expensive in Turkey. There's a famous thing where someone bought a brand new Volkswagen Tiguan in the UK, and it was like 40 grand.
Mhm.
And it cost the same amount of money for a 2001 Renault 12 in Turkey,
Really? I
which was
did not
like
know that.
300,000 miles on it.
Shit. Okay.
Prices are astronomical because there's high prices on imported new cars,
Mhm.
100% import tax, for example. I don't know what it is, people will tell you, but different cars, different, but it's massive. So new cars are expensive, and therefore second-hand cars are kept on the road all the time.
Yeah.
So there's these little, I think they call them, oh, I can't really remember, but it's like a little industrial unit that you might have in your town or mine, but they're everywhere in every little village. And there's someone who does welding, someone who does, makes UPVC windows, for example, and melts their own glass, and so the ingenuity, like you said, is astonishing.
It is.
Everything can be fixed and is. And a neighbour of mine bought a car, which honestly, in the UK, not only would it have been scrapped, but it would have been scrapped 20 years ago.
Mhm.
And they bought it, and it looked like, I mean, it's definitely a write-off in the UK. The whole front end had gone, and they
Mhm.
literally using washing machine parts, using the panels off it, using anything, made it, and it looked and sprayed it up, and it looked amazing. I'm not saying it was as safe as it would pass an MOT here, but
Yeah.
that's the ingenuity that leads to being able to fix things like your bike and my bike when things happen unexpectedly on the road. So long live it.
And it was hugely liberating in a sense, just because like if something does go wrong and you're in perceived the middle of nowhere, like
Yeah,
you're not in trouble, because there are people around that can fix it. It's not going to be like a trip-ending cost most of the time.
yeah.
Whereas like, that could happen in France. What did I pay? I paid like a hundred pounds to get my tires changed here the other day, plus like a 15 pound fee for them to dispose of the tire. Like I was like, mate, we had a complete radiator of Eva's swapped out from another bike for less than that, and like they were fashioning custom brackets and like just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's insane the difference. Yeah.
yeah. The two guys from Ireland that are in that region now, they were saying that they had to have the cylinder head repaired on their bike because the threads had actually been shredded on one of them and stripped.
Wow. Okay.
And they took the cylinder head off, put a new bolt in, threaded it,
Yeah.
locked it in, blah, 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 did the whole thing, 25 euros.
Yeah. I
So,
totally believe
yeah,
that. Yeah.
that's, I mean, you do that here, you throw your bike away.
Yeah,
It's
man. Like without, I don't want to like digress too much, but like one thing that was really stark was like coming back to Europe and being like, well, where are all your old cars? Because you get so used to just like, seeing,
yeah.
cars of a certain age, but like, everyone's yeah, I don't want to go off on a bit of a tirade here, but you have everyone driving Teslas here, and it's like, well, that's cool, but like surely it's more eco-friendly just to not throw away your
Of
2010 vehicle instead of buying this brand new.
course it is. Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, but absolutely, yeah. So there's a lot to be said for that part of the world. There's a lot of positives there.
massively, massively.
Definitely.
Um, yeah. So sorry, let me bring myself back on track. We're in Georgia.
Yeah,
Managed to fix that, no problems. We're on the road again. And then yeah, I guess for us, like the real challenge on this trip, right, was going to Russia, right? We were pretty nervous about it. And
yeah.
I think, just specifically this,
Current situation.
the current situation over there, and so we managed to secure multiple entry visas in New Zealand. That was actually a relatively straightforward process. But like we just met so many people who were warning us, telling us, they'll go through your phones, they'll look at everything. We met this really lovely South African couple the day before we crossed the border, and they'd had an absolute hell of a time. Like
No.
basically, she was a photojournalist, got denied entry at the border, had to like fly to Georgia. He ended up on a blooming military road accidentally with an attack helicopter coming after him and having to go to court. And it's just all these stories. So we're a bit like, oh God, like
Yeah.
what are we doing? And we just had a great time. Honestly, like the people at the border, we found them to be like super friendly, super nice. Yes, it's a long border process, but
Mm,
like it's so it is super bureaucratic, but like people are nice to you. They understand, like they're friendly.
mm.
Um, and we just had an amazing time in Chechnya and Dagestan, which were also regions that we'd sort of been warned about as being like potentially volatile. And I think like yeah, once again, like I sort of mentioned, like, we were going to places in Slovenia and people were inviting us in. We found that so much through this region, like there was one point where I was adjusting Eva's chain and like within 2 seconds, like all these guys balled up. How can we help? Right back to our house. We're gonna, like, all right, no, we're not looking at the bike until we've eaten. All right, you've got to stay here, and just such lovely, lovely people and people, and probably go over this again, but like just people who clearly don't have a whole lot. I mean, this guy's house was literally just cinder blocks that have been cemented together. He had a beautiful family, but just like so willing to just help. And I couldn't speak highly enough of the people of that region, And I think ultimately, like, it made us feel way more comfortable about crossing Russia again, our longer trip as we sort of came out of
Yeah.
Kazakhstan. And yeah, I mean, obviously there are signs that there's a war going on. There's big billboards trying to recruit people, and I don't want to obviously talk to
No. But,
what the feeling of what all what all Russian people are feeling about this war. But like the people that we met, we definitely got a feeling like they're not going to come out and say it. They're not going to be like, well, look,
no,
see what's happening there. It's just not how it's done there. But you know that a lot of these people, based on the questions that they're asking you and the comments they're making, you're like, yeah, they're not on board with this. So yeah,
it's a dreadful situation.
it is. Yeah.
Pray that it's over for everybody, really, because I always avoid politics from it. So, but this is a humanitarian thing, I guess. It's
Mm.
not just the Ukrainian people that are dying, because all those soldiers that are going there and dying were just like you and me. They're just normal people that didn't want to go there, and they're dying as well. So it's just a dreadful situation.
Yeah, yeah. There's people who are suffering and that's just war, isn't it? And it should always be stopped wherever possible, I think, Yeah. Anyway, so as you said, like we shouldn't go too deep with this.
No, no. Let's just
But
stick Giorgio, not war, war. That's what they say, in it. Talk, talk, don't fight. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. But yeah, just lovely, like yeah, lovely people and yeah, different landscape as well. Like it starts, as you sort of head north to I think it's Astrakhan. It starts to get a little bit more barren, and we started to head into the the plains of Kazakhstan, which are just this insane place to be. Like just like you couldn't draw a line that straight across the horizon. It's just yeah, it's wicked. But then you start seeing camels and
I was just about to say, did you see your first camel at some point? I guess.
yeah. Yeah, they're amazing animals, man. We stopped at one point. There was must have been a group of about 12 of them, and it's like one of these moments where you see these videos of like people in like national parks in America, and they're like poking a
Oh,
bear,
they
and
get spat at.
yeah, yeah. Well, all these camels started walking towards us, and we're like,
You're
"Are
like,
we doing something really stupid here?" Like,
yeah, yeah.
but they're
In
lovely. Yeah,
first
they're
gear.
lovely animals. They're free. Well, they're not freaky. They're just weird. They're just different
They're
to any
just
other
so
animal.
unusual, aren't they?
Yeah, but so gentle. They're
Yeah,
gentle
yeah.
giant. Yeah.
And what time of year was it by the time you got in that neck of the woods?
God, that's a good question. I want to say it was like June, like mid-June maybe.
Right.
It was hot, bro. It was
Was
40
so
degrees
yeah.
every single day. And like at that point, like even though you're riding it, what is it, like 120 kilometers, like doesn't matter how fast you're going, you're still just sweating.
Just blowing warm air on you, isn't it?
It's like being riding in a hairdryer, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we did that for, weeks basically, from Kazakhstan and down into Uzbekistan. Like it really only started to cool down once we got to Tajikistan, and it was hard going, mate. Like, yeah.
What did you do about riding gear, knowing you were going to be going? I mean, you were obviously aimed from May to September, so you'd gone for that type of weather, but
Mm.
the geographical distances are so huge, you must have anticipated this really hot weather. So did you take different layers? Did you take mesh with armor? What did you think about what your plan?
Thought about the mesh with armor, and then sort of decided against it. I just honestly, I just found the cheapest possible riding gear that I could get with the most amount of vents. And that was it. Like I think my whole total riding gear, like pants and jacket, were like £300 brand new. Like
Oh,
they weren't expensive.
that's
Like,
amazing. You see, as a Yorkshireman and you as a Scotsman, I appreciate that. That is amazing.
yeah, I mean, I'll save a buck where I can, mate. You know. Well, the way I see it, like these Gore-Tex jackets, like they're great and everything, but they always leak in the end. So
Well,
I just go for like one of these big, like over the gear kind of things, and like that
yeah, of
keeps the wind out. And yeah, I just
course it does. And you can take it off and wrap it up, can't you?
yeah, and it's also a bit cheaper, which is nice.
Yeah,
But yeah,
you might have left the UK when you were 8, but it stayed with you. That's good.
it has, mate. It has, yeah. But yeah. So I mean, it was hot. It was hot. Like, and I think at the end of the day, like you don't want to be, I'm still riding on my gear, even though like we're just cruising along these motorways. Like the roads in Kazakhstan are pretty fantastic. Although it's deceptive. Like there'll be nothing but like brilliant tarmac, and then all of a sudden there's just these huge potholes. I think that was where I got my first rim dent of many on this trip.
Oh, did you?
Was in Kazakhstan. But yeah.
How did you deal with them? Were they sufficient to puncture, to lose a seal, or what happened?
Well, so I run tubes.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, intentionally for that reason. So yeah, never had a real problem with it. There was one I got in Tajikistan, which was probably, I guess, if you look at like sort of like the first two knuckles of your finger, it was probably about that wide. So it was a proper one. But I mean, yeah, I managed to ride it back and got some heat on it and bashed it back into place. And yeah,
That's the great thing about tubes, and you don't
it
have to
is.
worry about losing that seal.
Yeah, exactly. And
And they're
they're,
easy to
they're
fix.
definitely a bit more hassle when there is a puncture. Like we had a
Yeah.
lot of punctures in Tajikistan for sure,
Yeah.
but like you just get quick at changing them. The first time it's always a nightmare, but like by the time you've done two or three, yeah. And like with my bike, I only had one puncture on the entire trip, and it was in England once I'd got back.
Really
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the tubes
amazing.
didn't bother me too much. Yeah, Eva got two, I think, two punctures. Uh,
Yeah.
one was a nightmare. The rear wheel's always
Oh,
an
of course.
issue.
It's always going to be in the back, in it.
Yeah, yeah. But nah, it was all good, yeah. But no, so yeah, I mean the rims are pretty soft in the Tenere, but like it wasn't too much of an issue. But yeah, I mean once again, Uzbekistan is I think where things started to really get interesting for us. Like obviously we've just crossed this big desert. It was really cool. But you get to when we got to Kiva, which is just the most insane city in Uzbekistan. Like it's sort of like it was kind of in my head like a kind of Istanbul times 1,000, like in a way, because it's like it's not as busy, it's not as packed, but it's like this ancient old city that's just perfectly preserved, and you can stay in the middle of it. And I would
Wow.
recommend to anybody like Google it, have a look at it, and like architecturally, it's just stunning.
What's
It's
it called again?
Kiva, Khiva, I think.
Khiva. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's wicked, man. And same with Bukhara and Samarkand. They're incredible ancient cities in Uzbekistan, and yeah, the people are lovely. And I mean, I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record, but yeah,
No,
they're
no.
just like
It's
lovely people.
important. A lot of people don't have either. I don't know whether it's the madness, the courage, the confidence, or the time, or all of those things, some of those things are what, but a lot of people don't do what you've done. They think about it, they dream about it, fantasize about it, and they wish they'd done it at some point, but they don't necessarily don't do it. And then I guess you can still do it in your 60s easy enough, maybe even your early 70s, but there's going to come a time when you I'm I live and breathe bikes, and I see people look at all the forums and pages and groups, and there's always at some point I'm thinking of a bike group called senior motorcyclists, and 60 plus, and I guess people in the 60s and early 70s, they don't seem to be any different, apart from you don't bounce as well, you take a bit longer
Yeah,
to fix. um but there's always someone sort of in their 80s going onto a trike. Thank God they're still riding, or a smaller bike because heavy bikes are too heavy to pick up. But they always will be someone saying, "I always dreamt of doing that. I wish I'd done that, but I think I'm at the point now where I just can't do that." So massive big up to you guys for doing it, because it's done now. It's there. no matter what happens now, at some point you're going to be sat, with, I want to say grandchildren, children, grandchildren at some point saying, guess what? Long before you were born, when I was young, I did this. And you're going to show them pictures and videos, and they're going to be like, wow. And
Mm,
that's a massive thing. You know, it's a bigger thing for me at my age than it is for you now. I can see it because I've got grandkids. And to be able
mm.
to say, look at this, this was granddad when he was doing, oh, wow. You know, it's a massive achievement. So,
Oh,
congratulations for even thinking about it.
well, thank you so much, and really appreciate you saying that. I think like if there's anyone listening that's sort of on the fence, I would just say it's not that hard. Like once you actually get out onto the road, and I think a lot of it comes to like what's your current life situation? We had no mortgage, we had no kids, we
Yeah.
had no dependents. Basically, we could go off and do this. So,
Yeah.
super lucky in it. But it was a four years worth of planning and saving to get to the point where we could. But I would just, I mean, I have absolutely no regrets at all for
No, I
having
bet.
done it, and I'm sure as you say, as life sort of goes on, I'll probably appreciate that experience even more.
I think so. And I'm sure there'll be some more coming up.
Yeah, hopefully,
Yeah, there will be, I'm sure. I mean,
yeah,
the thing is, they don't all have to be made, they don't have to be 5 months, 6 months long, do they? So,
yeah, yeah.
you could be surprised. We just talked about Turkey, for example. You could probably do that in a month. You could do that, 3 or 4 weeks.
Mhm,
Um, and yeah, not to the same degree, but certainly an experience to remember.
mhm,
I'm not really one for, getting an EasyJet flight to the beach and sitting on the beach. It's not what I want to do. People say, "Oh, what did you do?" "Oh, I did this." "Oh my God, I just sat on the beach or by the pool and got drunk." And I'm like, "Nah, that's
not for
not me.
you.
Not for me." You know, um, people. I had 62 holidays. Great. What did you do? Got pissed up, laid
Yeah,
around the beach, around the
all the
pool.
same as you do at home. Okay, yeah.
Same as you did last year and the year before. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I hear
So
you, mate. That's the thing. I mean, I've never actually had one of these super relaxing holidays, I think, in my entire life. And I'm kind of scared that if I do it, maybe I'll really love it. And it's like,
yeah,
oh, there
yeah.
goes the
Sell the
adventure. It's
bikes, never get on the bike
over.
again.
I almost don't want to know.
Yeah, you'll be on the TUI websites, get rid of all the bike sites and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah. So Russia and then into Kazakhstan, and you felt like you were proper in Asia there. You really
Yeah.
beginning, you've left Europe far behind.
Yep.
You've got camels and effectively steppe desert, haven't you? There. Beautiful, lovely people again. There's a saying, the less people have got, the more they give. And
Mhm.
it seems very, it's not universal, but by and large, you do find that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so where did you go from there? What was that?
So
You know,
basically, it's flat, right? The second you go from Georgia north past the Caucasus Mountains,
yeah.
you're flat until you get to Tajikistan, and it's this really amazing geographical change because you're just so used to desert and flat and hot, and then boom, there are mountains all of a sudden, and
Could you
we were.
see that because it's so flat? Could you see them beginning to come into the
So it
horizon?
wasn't like this way, way away in the distance. I think the air quality is probably not so great, and I don't know why that is. I think it's probably just dust and wind. But like
Yeah,
but you do like you see something that's taller than a house initially, and like oh, and
yeah.
then it's
Ooh,
like half the size of of a high rise, and you're like whoa, and it just gets
size of
more and
that hill, it must be like 100 meters high. Yeah.
exactly. And then I think we went from seeing flat to like we went up to this in the same day we went up to this really amazing oh, I can't remember the name of the Fan Mountains. We spent a few days up there, and that was incredible. Yeah, I mean, Tajikistan's just it's epic. Like Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, in terms of like the off-road riding, and like the visual like feast, are probably were totally our two favorite countries, and they're completely polar opposites. I mean, Tajikistan is rocky, hard, barren, like I mean, barren in the sense that like there's not a lot of natural vegetation. Obviously, people like divert the rivers and like
Yeah.
and they grow food in these amazing places. Um, but then you have Kyrgyzstan, which is sort of like a little bit further around, and like you're talking like high, like grass pasture, like wild horses roaming
Yeah.
free, yurt camps everywhere. Like they're
Did you
really
see any of
different.
those? I mean, did you see any of these yurts with people, the nomadic people? Did you
Yeah,
see?
yeah, yeah. Everywhere, everywhere. They're really common. We met a lot of these guys. Like we'd be like sitting there cooking, and somebody would ride past on a horse, and we'd be like, "Come and have some food," and yeah, just all
That
the
is
time.
just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a crazy, crazy lifestyle. And it's you can just tell that people have been doing it for such a long time, and
Oh, it's an ancient way of life, isn't it?
yeah.
Ancient.
Yeah, beautiful people. We'll skip ahead quickly. We actually ended up going to the World Nomad Games in Kazakhstan, which is kind of like the Olympics for, I guess, a lot of these nomadic
Yeah.
tribe people. And
Wow.
yeah, just such a rich culture. Like I could not appreciate how rich their culture is until going there, and you're just like, wow, like every single different region, people look completely different in dress, and they're all super interested in like, well, what do you think about Kazakhstan, and what do you think about Tajikistan,
So
and
proud.
they are. They really are. Super cool, and they do archery and well, they have a lot of sporting events, and that's really cool. But yeah,
Honest.
no, I mean it was wild. But I'll skip back to Tajikistan real quickly because that's where my dad, my uncle, and my sister
Yeah. Yeah.
came and met us, and like they'd rented a couple bikes. They were complete duds. Like I think they went through like 6 motorcycles, and by the end of it, two of them were working, and just
Oh
it was,
no.
it was a real like. But it was awesome, it was super cool to have them there. And it was really fun to like share the adventure with them for a wee bit.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was mega. I mean, we went up to this one area called the Bartang Valley, which was a place that I'd always wanted to go to. Most people, when they go to Tajikistan, they'll do the Pamir Highway, which is like the classic. And I think if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous, you'll go down and you'll do the Wakhan corridor.
Yeah.
But there's this other road called the Bartang Valley, and way less people go up there on motorcycles, and it's awesome, man. It's just like
Um,
the coolest place. I don't know how we got ourselves into this position, but basically there was a village halfway up, and they knew we were coming, and so they got a bunch of singers from another village, and
they'll
we
have a
well,
they'll have a Facebook group,
mate, yeah, yeah.
like a WhatsApp group. Guess
Oh,
what?
they must have, mate. Yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, long story short, we did have a four-wheel drive with us because we couldn't get these motorcycles to work.
Yeah.
And it was actually like one of the guys, like in the, but I just, yeah, he was like, yeah, like come to my village, like we'll do this, and we bowled up to this village, man, and they just threw this party, and it was the most surreal thing. Like, we were like everyone was dancing and singing, and we just felt like how lucky are we to be here? You know what I mean? It was like totally non-touristy, totally authentic experience, and just really like such a highlight for us. Yeah.
Lifetime memory, eh?
Mate, it was insane. It was insane. And their village is so cool, like they're really smart people. I mean, they're running, they have like streams that come down, and those are like, spinning like these huge stones that they use to like, make wheat, and
Yeah,
the big
yeah. It's almost
fine
what
flour.
we were doing 500 years ago, and
Yet they had their own hydroelectric system that they'd built, which was insane, and just yeah, like super clever people in really challenging environments, and just yeah, I could play their on for ages, but the writing was incredible, and I remember specifically there was this one moment where there's sort of like two wheel tracks, and like my dad's on the left, I'm on the right, and we're just like riding through this winding, like valley, like right next to each other, and I just remember being like, this is like a memory I will have for like the rest of my life. It was really, really special, which was cool.
you know, not wanting to put anything negative on that because it's a very positive thing. But I lost my dad recently,
Mhm.
and I've got two sons, and I was talking to them about memories of my dad and how they give me strength, knowing what a guy he was and what a good dad he was, and the things we did. I learnt my dad was a biker, and and when I was a little boy, he had a sort of a Triumph Thunderbird, the original early 1958 or something, and he was always working on it, and he always got me out there, hold this, do this, and I learned from him. Um, and I'm no mechanic, but I can do little bits and bobs. Everything I learned from my dad,
Mhm.
whether it's mechanics, decorating, driving, riding, whatever it is, being a man, being a person. And so that memory definitely will be something that will give you strength in your older years because that's how it works. Those thoughts now become positive memories, and it's an amazing thing. So I'm pleased you did that.
Yeah, mate. Oh, like, thank you. And I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. I'll hold on to that for the rest of my
Yeah,
life.
I
You
know
know,
you will. That's
it was
amazing.
such a special moment, mate. Yeah. And
Oh,
I think it had an impact on them as well. Like, they're now having lived in New Zealand for the last like, for decades and decades. They're off to Spain now, and I think, it's that whole like pulling them out into the world and going, oh wow, this is really fun and enjoyable.
yeah.
And I think they're just carrying on with that, which is really cool to see as well.
Perhaps you've opened their eyes as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe, hopefully. I mean, they've opened their own, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
he was always keen to come out and join.
yeah.
And he was like, "Where should I do it?" And I was like, "You should come to Tajikistan. It'll be totally different to anywhere you've been, And it was.
That is just the most amazing thing, for you're doing that. And I'm thinking, like, my son will be doing that, and we're going to fly out to a place in, Central Asia and meet them and ride a few days with them. And it's just like, what?
It
That's
was bonkers.
a great thing that
Yeah.
they did for you as well. That is amazing.
Yeah, and it was one of these things that just kind of like organically happened as well. We're chatting about it at I think like my cousin's 30th, and my uncle's ears kind of pricked up. He's like, "Oh, that sounds amazing! Like, can I come?" And we were like, "Absolutely!"
Must
Like,
come.
yeah.
And I bet you were so excited, weren't you, when you were
Oh,
like the few days leading up to it? Oh, this time next week will be. I bet that was great.
it was wicked, man. It was wicked, and they totally got in on the adventure as well. Like, it was in Tajikistan, the Wakhan corridor, where Eva had a really bad crash. She went into sand, probably doing like 80 to 90 kilometers an hour. And she was okay. She's got a big scar on her nose. And she'd kind of hurt her knee a little bit, but like ultimately okay, all
Yeah,
things considered.
yeah.
Her bike though was a total mess. Like, when you're
No,
picking up bits of circuit board off the ground, like, we were like, oof, like
this
this
is
is not good.
yeah. How's your
Um,
leg, by the way?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh no, well, I
Yeah.
mean, it was pretty clear pretty quickly that she was okay, and that was the main
Yeah.
thing. I mean, there was obviously another story which I won't go too deep with a drunk doctor in a Tajik hospital, but
Yeah, well, you mentioned it earlier, so you're gonna have to tell us about that in a bit. So,
yeah, I mean, well, basically, we ended up towing this bike, about 80 k's off road back, out of the area that we were in. So I was riding in the front, my dad jumped in the back, and luckily we had a comm system so we could actually talk. So it's
yeah.
kind of funky. Like I was the accelerator, he was the brakes, and we just, we were riding over we went through sand and everything
Wow.
that little section. But yeah, ended up back staying at a guest house and basically called the hospital and a small town called Ishkashim. And yeah, we picked up the doctor on the way and he was steaming, mate. He was absolutely, and everyone kept telling us, he's like, oh, best doctor, best doctor. But yeah, after work, glug,
Yeah,
glug,
yeah.
glug, like, And in true Tajik form, I mean, he ended up coming back to the guest house with us, and I wanted to give him a bottle of whiskey. We had a nice bottle of scotch, and we were
Yeah,
like, "Hey,
and
we
they're
got
all
like
saying, "Don't give him whiskey." No.
well, he didn't want it. He was like, "Let's drink it
Oh,
now." And
oh,
so,
right. Yeah,
so it was just me and him at this point. And by the time everyone else rolls up, I mean, me and this guy are just totally legless. He walked off with my cell phone. He left his doctor's cell phone behind, and we kept getting phone calls from this
he's
guy.
giving birth now. You need to come now.
I know, but he's not here. I'm sorry. Like,
I'll give you
well,
my number. Give him a ring on this.
exactly. So no, I mean it was pretty wild, but thank God Eva was okay. That was the main thing. And I gotta say, like a huge shout out to Eva because I mean the thing is like she doesn't have the experience in motorbiking that I do or any of the other people that were on that trip where do like we'd done one 16-day trip in New Zealand kind of as like a prepare. I got her she got a TTR 250 for her sort of like first like proper bike and but she'd done that and kind of going from that to I mean we both got our full licenses maybe like because I had never bothered to get it. I didn't need anything that wasn't a learner bike basically. I can get a
Yeah,
KTM 450 and a learner license. I was like that's enough for me. Um
yeah,
but so we both got our like full licenses like maybe like a month before we left for this trip. But yeah, I mean, Eva just like basically just came out and just tackled this trip with like not a lot of experience and
amazing.
just was like it was pretty incredible, man. It was pretty incredible. Like, yeah, she was going on stuff that like I think pretty seasoned motorcyclists would probably they would definitely pause, before doing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I'm gonna say.
yeah, and so naturally, as putting yourself in that environment, there were a few crashes and Yeah, she just handled it like an absolute champion. From her eyes, there was never any question about, like I don't want to do this trip anymore. It was,
Oh,
can my motorcycle do this trip?
that's brilliant. I was going to mention that about the natural knock-in confidence when you have an off. It
Hmm.
is a bit. Sometimes you're like, if I don't get on, I'm never going to get on again because that shook me up a bit, or
Oh
a near miss. I think a lot when you're on road, you have a bit of a near miss. It can be a bit like, ooh,
yeah.
we've all sat at the side of the road and thought. So yeah,
And especially in these countries, I mean, the driving style is very different to what we are used to. And in some ways, like, I gotta say, like the actual level of driving is way better. Like because people are focused. Yeah, yeah, you might have two oncoming cars, like staring you in the face, and you're both flashing each other, and you're trying to figure your way out. But like, at least they're present of mind. Like,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
not
No,
on their
you're
cell
right.
phone.
They've got to be, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
even that, like being thrown into that environment, like that's another thing. You just driving on the road and the roads are you've got potholes and there's all these different. She did an amazing job. It was
Oh, it's
pretty
brilliant.
awesome.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Somebody
so
did once say to me, "You're from the UK. They drive on the left, don't they?" Said, "Yeah." He said, "What side of the road do they drive on in?" I think it was Turkey, and I said, "Well, both sides, really. Wherever there's a space, it's like, oh,
yeah, yeah. But how good? And it's way more efficient. You don't have
well,
these
yeah,
lines of cars following this really slow truck. Nah, everyone just freaking overtakes them and gets it
exactly."
done.
And what
It's
I
very
often find, they've got these little dirt things at the side of all the roads, and bikes tend to go whichever way. So they'll come out of wherever they are, and they'll come up the dual carriageway the wrong way on this little thing at the side, and it's like, what? God.
Yep,
You
yep. That sounds about right. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, luckily we never had any bad tangles. Like I think it's kind of like going to like Southeast Asia or something like that. Like from the outside looking in, it looks like chaos, but
Yes.
there is this kind of like methodology to it. And I think that's one of the really important things about going and riding a motorcycle in other countries is you have to be always looking at how the drivers and riders in that country are conducting themselves and,
Yeah.
and react accordingly.
Yeah.
It doesn't do you any good to bowl up and ride as if you're on a UK road or a New Zealand road. You have to
No,
adapt,
you'd be dead.
otherwise
Yeah.
you piss people off, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
It's like they're doing this, like on a red light, they come through it, and you're like, excuse me. So
Yeah,
you do it as well, because otherwise you're never going to get there.
exactly, exactly. It's like they queue differently over there as well. It's not an orderly queue. It's you just ram yourself into where you want to get to, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I always say, just get the biggest vehicle to your right or to your left, depending where you are, and just use them as a shield because they don't want to get hit. And that's the way. I remember being in Thailand, and when there's like 1,000 bikes around you, and they're at a crossing, and they just go for it. When you set off, it's like MotoGP
Hmm,
on mopeds. It's just like everybody's across, and it's like
totally.
it's still red, and it's like, yeah. So you're stood there thinking, oh, whatever, and you've got to go as well because otherwise you ain't going anywhere.
I kind of find the riding in Thailand, not that I've done very much, but like that region, it's almost like water moving. It's like
Yes,
fast in the middle, slower on the side, and it
yeah, absolutely.
pulls its way through. It's really cool. Yeah.
It is. I don't know if you've ridden in the Philippines, but that
No.
that is very similar. I mean, only in the last 5 years has bikes become the thing in the Philippines as it has been in Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries. For whatever reason, they've just exploded. Chinese bikes, 150 bikes are everywhere. And I was there in July in the Philippines, and for the first time, having been there many, many times, I was like, this is that same flow you're talking about has sort of organically grown there because you've got so many people. There's got to be a flow. There's got to be a way. And people like, I think it's that style you're talking about where you just give way because otherwise everyone's going to be crashing all the time, every day. There's going to be 1,000 deaths a day, and there isn't. So it automatically, a bit like in India and rickshaws and stuff. And the reason they're not dead every day is because you've got to give way or you're not going anywhere.
Yep.
Whereas in England, and certainly, well, I think in most Western countries, there's this competitive style of driving where that's my right of way,
Yeah.
and I'd rather crash than let you go because it's my right of way. And it's like,
Yeah.
what?
I know. How many of these car cam like videos do you see where like somebody's cruising along, somebody pulls out, and the first thing they do is lay on the horn, and it's like, mate, you had oodles of room to stop, but they don't. They just ram into the back
Yeah,
of
you
some.
see all this, whose fault was it? And it's like,
Yeah,
yours.
yeah. Basically,
Just
don't
all you had to
don't
do
drive
was,
like an idiot.
yeah, just take your foot off the accelerator. No, because it's a 40 limit. I'm doing 40. You shouldn't have pulled in.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go then.
Oh, good on you, mate. You don't have a car for the next couple of weeks until
Yeah.
you
But you
figure it
might have
out.
12 views on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, yeah. I know that was another one I was prepared for in Russia, because you see all these Russian dash cams, and I was like,
You do,
oh,
yeah.
nah, it was fine. They drive fast, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with it.
So what about the bike? How did you get that fixed up then?
Oh yeah, so that was, gosh, what do we have to do? So the tail light was gone, the headlight was non-existent, mudguard was split in two, the speedometer was gone, the ignition barrel, the immobilizer unit in the ignition barrel done. So basically we could turn it on, but the fuel pump wouldn't run, like none of that was going. So yeah, we towed it back to Ishkashim, got it back to Dushanbe after a couple of weeks, and there is just this mechanic in Dushanbe. His name's Aziz, and he is a freaking legend. Like the amount of overlanders this guy must fix. I mean, every time you go there, there's a group of bikers that are out there, usually from Western countries, passing
Yeah.
through. Absolute magician. He took just complete care of us. So new indicators, new headlight, brackets to mount that. I managed to find an immobilizer bypass unit online. He arranged to get one from Russia. Got that. No, that worked well. He welded up the shitty job I'd done on the clutch
Oh, yeah.
and then I think, yeah, just with epoxy and zip ties, we managed to sort of like fix everything else. Just, like the mud guard, and yeah, that's still on there, which is good. And yeah, I mean, I think he did all that work and it just cost nothing, man. Like, I think he basically charged us the equivalent of like maybe $50, if that, and just wouldn't take anything else, like just super, super
Yeah.
fine. So he got us back on the road. I mean, we were making all these contingency plans, like, okay, well, we'll drive it up to Osh, we'll put it on transport in Osh and get it to Poland. Turns out we didn't need it, so it was awesome. We just carried on the trip as per usual. We didn't go through and do the rest of the Pamir, which is kind of one of the regrets, but it was like we'd already been in Tajikistan, I think, for a month at this point.
Yeah.
So we nipped back up into Uzbekistan, dropped down into Osh and Kyrgyzstan. But yeah, yeah,
Wow.
everything was working, which was great. Yeah,
Yeah. And that just takes you back to that. The ability for people to fix things is just astonishing. I
just
mean,
a
if that
legend.
happened to that bike in London, I mean, talk about a total loss. It was just like you only have to crack a piece of plastic on a bike now, the total loss. So that'd
Yeah,
just be
totally.
throw it away. So it's amazing, isn't it?
Mate, he just got it done, eh? He was an absolute legend. And yeah, that's where I sort of like straightened out my rim after the big dent. I think I got that when I found out basically that Eva had a crash. Somebody caught up and was like, "Eva's had a crash," and I was like, "Oh," and just hustled. Um, but yeah, he was a legend. I mean, I had a leaking fork seal as well. He did that for me. It just yeah, nah, absolute solid guy. And I think there's like kind of these like little these figures of like, well, maybe I just have a real appreciation for like the good work that a good mechanic does. Because we had the same thing in Sarajevo,
Mhm.
we had the same thing in Moscow. You meet these people that are just like they totally enable a community to form around them because they're just,
Yeah.
they're just taking care of everyone. Yeah, I don't want to get too wishy-washy with it, but I mean they're
No,
just
no, no. I understand. Yeah, and I think it's an art that's gone by and large in the West now.
mm,
Everybody. I mean, may sound a bit obscure, but if you think back to certainly in the UK, you'd have a blacksmith and they'd have a wheelwright and they'd have somebody that would a craftsman that did those little jobs. That somebody's wheel broke and they'd go and fix it for them. A joiner would come and fix their you know, there was a little, not necessarily a little person, but there'd be a person that would deal with those things, and they still exist in places where they don't have that throwaway, plug and play society anymore,
yeah.
or yet.
Yeah, yeah,
Hopefully
yeah.
they never
Maybe
do.
maybe it will change. I mean, there's obviously been like, a huge shift in, say, like the cars that they're driving, right? I mean, like you still see, especially in Russia, like the old school, like Lada Niva 4x4s, like
Yeah,
they're awesome, man. They're so cool.
right.
But there's, so many more like Chinese cars coming into that market now. And I just wonder how long it will take, like if there's a good distribution, parts distribution
Yeah,
system, how long you'll see those sort of like small independent people, once again, not small, but like, those independent people
yeah,
who
definitely.
yeah, who are able to fix that, or who are required to fix it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
might see that start to change in the near future, I wonder.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it's inevitable. If the products change, then the people that fix them is going to have to change, aren't they? Or they'll have to adapt. Maybe you know, they'll have a 12-inch sort of TFT screens hung up in the back of a dusty workshop instead. So instead of, soldering it, they'll just be like, yeah, you just need this, mate. Plug it in. Got found
Yeah.
this in a pass somewhere where someone had rolled it in, so you can have it for 40 euros, or whatever.
I
Yeah.
tell you, I mean, yeah, I think it was Dushanbe we went to. It was actually, sorry, it was Dushanbe. They had this auto bazaar there, so they have bazaars kind of like all
Yeah.
throughout that region of the world. They're awesome. But this one was only for like automotive parts, and it was underground, and it was just one of the coolest places I've ever been to, mate. Like there was, one guy, all he sells is seats. Oh, that guy over there, he's the bearing guy. You can buy any kind of bearing from like the smallest thing to like truck bearings. You know,
Really
it was just it was so cool, man. Like we raided that place multiple times, like to get headlights and indicators and all sorts. But
fabulous.
oh, it was such a unique place. I've never been anywhere like that. Yeah, and there's an energy, like, and you're kind of like, oh, well, I need to find this. So you chat, pull somebody aside, and oh, yeah, I know a place, and you walk through the maze, and
There is a certain, I think all that, goes back to our sort of almost like our hunter-gatherer type feeling, that primeval thing of having the opportunity to get what you need when you need it, and anticipating, oh, I'm probably going to need that, and not just a man, but certainly from my point of view, as a man going in like an auto jumble, there's a certain thing. It's like, oh wow, you don't even need it, do you? But you want it because you think, oh, I'll buy this BSA mudguard and then I'll buy the rest of the bike later.
yeah, right.
It's crazy, isn't it?
So is that quite a common thing in the UK? Because I did go to one just before I left, and it was pretty awesome. Like we have nothing like that in New Zealand. So is that you still see quite a
Yeah,
few of those?
yeah, auto jumbles. Yeah, there's a big one near us. I mean, I say near us. It's in Lincolnshire, so it's 40, 50 miles south. I
Mhm.
think they do it once a month in an old RAF base. I'll put the link on if I can find it. Um, and it's huge. You just go there and it's just piles of headlamps and piles of wheels and tires that can no longer ever be found, and seats off old British bikes, Japanese bikes, and wiring harnesses hung up with a handwritten Yamaha Teneres 1987 blah 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 written on, and oh, it's like, oh wow. And
That's awesome. What a feast for the eyes, eh?
yeah, and I've been there and bought stuff for bikes I don't have, just because I'm, I've never. I know that when I speak to people on groups, they are like literally like rocking horse shit. You're never going to get one of them, and I'll be like, I'll have that. And it'll be in a carrier bag in my motorbike shed, and someone will go, you know what? I've never been able to get. It's impossible to get one. You know what? I think I've got one of them. Yeah, get lost. I am honestly.
That's awesome, man.
So yeah, it's a relatively well, it's a very popular thing. I just don't know how many there are in what area. But yeah, just if you Google it, you'll find them definitely.
Mhm. That's wicked, man.
So
Wicked.
you've had this accident. You've had your bike repaired. I guess you're pretty much as far south east as you're going to be there.
Yeah.
It's sort of not going in then into. You were talking that you may have gone initially. You had the thought of Mongolia, but you
Yes.
didn't do that. So you were then to turn what? South or northwest, or how did you come back?
So from Tajikistan, we headed northeast, I guess, up into Kyrgyzstan, and then
Yeah,
from Kyrgyzstan, we kind of like went out to the east and then headed north
yeah,
from there. So we went to Almaty and Astana in Kazakhstan, and then sort of started heading northwest back home.
West back home, yeah. And how was the weather by then? Was it still hot or was it?
We had a few cold days in Kazakhstan. I think we got really lucky in Russia. They had a really late, I guess, like end of the summer this year. So
Normally,
like we
beginning
were,
of September, they're starting to see snow, aren't they, in some places?
yeah, for sure. But I mean, for us, like we were hanging out in Moscow and it was like 22 degrees
Oh,
where that
wow.
big storm was coming through Europe, you know? So we were like, sweet.
Yeah, we're okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Honestly, like, yeah, and we were actually really enjoyed a lot of Russia. I think we ended up visiting maybe like we're not really city people normally. I think we were chatting about this before.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, we must have gone to maybe like 10 different cities in Russia, and like they're all different. They're all really varied, and because the Russian people are not just one people, if that makes sense. Like
Of
there's a
course.
culturally, it's quite diverse.
Yeah. Massive place.
It's a big
It's a
country.
Russian Federation, so a bit like the United States, isn't it? It's different states, different countries,
Yeah, exactly,
massive.
exactly. Yeah.
And did you find people that cultural mix in, if you like, in Western Russia, where the European, this side of the Caucasus, so like in Moscow, did you find the mix of people in that area as well, or were they all sort of blue-eyed, blonde-haired Russians, or did you have,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think there was definitely like a few, like you'd see, a few Kazakh people or Tajik people. I think a lot of Tajik and Uzbek people move to Moscow. But I would say by and large, it is your classic traditional, like, yeah,
European-looking?
European looking, yeah, Russian.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it was
Wow.
cool. And Moscow's a cool city. You know, we spent a couple of days there. Had a little. This is funny because like, I just think about this now, and like like Eva would quite often say like, "God, the trip would be boring if I wasn't here," and like she's so right because like she scratched a bloody police car in Moscow, and like,
No way.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And like now I'm thinking back at it, I'm telling all these stories. I'm like.
You've just gone 1,000 miles backwards, but great. Yeah, what happened there then?
Right. It would have just been smooth sailing, and I wouldn't have anywhere nearly the stories that I have now. But like that was all fine again. Like they were super nice, and they're these guys. Like they actually thought that we'd basically done it, and then just gone fuck whatever, and just like buggered off. So they came up, and there was a bit of an attitude, and then they realized very quickly that it was an accident. We hadn't realized, and that, they were like they were so nice about it. They were like you're a guest in our country, like we don't want to, we obviously want to make sure that you guys, leave with a positive experience, and so we'll
Yeah,
just,
that's
yeah, they were
brilliant.
just, yeah, it was super cool. And then I guess lastly, leaving Moscow, Eva's radiator after that little patch job in Croatia finally gave up the ghost. I think it was raining basically, and there was steam, and it was basically perished this metal putty. I'm not sure, but it finally gave up the ghost then, and we basically took it down to what was a motorcycle rental shop, and because we just wanted to get it to the closest place we could, and they were so good, man. They ripped a radiator out of Kawasaki ER6N, put that in one of their bikes, one of their rental bikes, realized that that radiator already had a leak, so they took that out, grabbed another ER6N, ripped that radiator out, and then this one worked. And it's just like, man, like, just yet again an example of just people going way above and beyond. And like, there's no way that you could come to New Zealand, and walk into a motorcycle rental shop and have them drop all tools. I mean, we were there for like 3 hours, man. We were back on the road. It was ridiculous.
You know,
Um,
that doesn't surprise me at all. And it is linked, but just as an aside, I rented a car in Spain, and I won't say where or when for obvious reasons. But I rented a car in Spain, and it had diamond cut alloys, and they were really nice wheels. And I thought, nice. But the curb is about this high. It's like,
but,
and it's got one of these auto park things where you just press a button and it finds, yeah, that'll park there. So I thought, oh, a novelty. Like they are these things, you're not going to use them, but you paid 1,500 quid extra for it on this car. If you'd bought one, so people use them. But I thought, rental car, try it. So I did it, found this space, beep, 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 beep. Yeah, shows a little thing. Let go of everything, it'll park. It parked, and then I heard this,
no.
and I thought, no. So I got out, and it had just scratched this rear driver's side alloy to bits. I was like,
Oh no, mate.
no. and you'd use your credit card as you do with a rental, and it's like £2,000 on it. And I was like,
Cool.
oh God. And I'd not paid all these extra because you end up doubling it, don't you?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
had paid for the minor, and of course, it doesn't include roof, glass, or wheels. I thought, I'm going to lose my deposit. So I start Googling for places where like alloy wheel refurbishment and stuff.
Hmm.
And I found, a bit like we were talking about, one of these little industrial areas where you can go. So I went, and actually, he was a Scotsman living in Spain, and I went and took this car, and I said, I wonder if you can have a look at this alloy. And he went, oh, all right, yeah. I said, can you fix it? He said, well, yeah. I said, thing is, it's a rental car, and I'm going to lose my deposit, you see. So I'd
Hmm.
rather if we can get it fixed. He says, yeah, yeah, no problem, mate. He says, can you leave it all day? I said, well, yeah, I'll have to, if you can take me up onto the main road, I'll get a bus or whatever. So he
Hmm.
says, yeah, okay. He says, how much do you want to pay? I said, well, I don't want to pay anything. And he says, yeah, but that's not an option, is it? He says, look, I'll be honest, there's three prices. I says, okay. He says, the first one is we just buff it up and spray it because it's like black and silver,
Hmm.
and they'll probably not see it because they quick check over when you take it back.
Yeah.
He says the next option is we refurb the alloy, we take it off, put it on a lathe,
Yep.
we refurb it, we diamond cut it again. So it was like €40. Next one's like €80.
Hmm.
So I said, okay. He says, and the next one is we take it out, we find a car same as it, we park at the side of it, and we swap the wheels. And I said, you what?
Mate, you're joking.
I'm not. And I said,
What?
you what? He said, yeah, we go into town. He says, I'm being honest with you, mate. He says, we pull up, same, there's a lot of these cars. It's a Peugeot. A lot of these cars, all the rental companies find them. And we're like, they all got the same locking wheel nut for that make.
Jeez.
I'll just swap it. And I was like, I can't let you do that, mate.
No, no,
So that is just not right.
it's
And he
not
went, I never said it were right. I'm just saying. And I was like, no, 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 no.
right.
He said, because some poor bugger who hasn't even done it is going to take that back and lose their deposit. He went, well, it's not your money, is it? I said, can't do it, mate. I said, I've got some morals.
Good
So
on
I
you, man.
said,
Yeah.
shall we do the one where you cut it and pay €80? Because neither can I have you painted it up and then the next person takes it back when it's worn off. So
Yeah.
let's go for that one. But it just reminded me when you said that, I was like, oh God, I'll
To
swap.
be,
My God.
they weren't, to be fair, that was not an offer. They weren't going to go out and rip a radiator.
I know, I
Like,
know.
mate,
No, I know, but it
that's
just clicked
amazing,
in my
though.
mind when you said that this rental place, and I thought, yeah, I'll never forget that. I remember sort of WhatsApping friends at home saying, "Guess what just happened to me?" And
Oh
they
my
were like,
God.
"You are joking."
That's insanity. Yeah, yeah.
That's bad, isn't it?
Some poor guy is probably going to drive home and his wife's going to beat him up because you know what I mean. Like, I just can't believe you've done this. I swear I didn't, honey. Like,
But yeah, always fastidious. Well, you weren't this time.
Yeah. And hey, 80 quid, I mean, you're still up at the end of the day. I mean,
Of
there's
you
no
are.
way that they would have charged you 80 quid for a
No way.
banged up rim. So
So thank God, yeah.
yeah.
So I was like really grateful to him, but very wary. And
Yes.
I came home and I said to my wife, I said, I've just like met some, like, it must be like mafia or something. I mean, that's just awful, isn't it? I mean, who would do that?
Mm.
But yeah, God. So yeah, just reminded me of that. I thought I'd just mention that.
Mate,
Don't.
that is such a good story. I can't I kind of still processing it. Like
I know.
far out.
So you're heading back. What's the next? What's the next country as you leave?
So basically we started heading home basically. We started heading west and yeah, I mean it was a lot more road, a lot less off-road. It was, like riding across Russia was cool. It was cool going to these cities. We still met some really lovely people. But it was kind of feeling the trip was over. So we were like, the high was kind of dipping off a little bit. And yeah, eventually we ended up in Estonia. And Estonia and Latvia, man, they are beautiful countries. They weren't even on my radar, but like
Yeah.
they're gorgeous, and really good campsites. It was kind of nice getting back to this part of the world because a lot of these campsites, like especially in Switzerland as well, they have like cut like logs and like wood you can use for fires and
Oh, really?
campfire at the
Like
end of the
fire
night.
pits and stuff that you can
Yeah,
use.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, we're like, oh, we're back in the fancy part of yeah. But it was really nice. And then yeah, so did some repairs in Poland. Eva spent, I think, maybe a week in Poland in Warsaw, just waiting on some parts. I drove off down to Italy and Switzerland and sort of rode the Alps for a bit, which was really
Oh,
nice.
wow.
Yeah, it was good riding through there. A good time of the year as well. Like
Yeah.
lots of oranges and yeah, and then we met up in France and we rode back and here we are. So yeah,
Wow. What an incredible adventure.
it was a lot of fun, man. It was a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then when did you get back?
Maybe 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. I've just been up in Scotland, catching up with some family, and then rode up to Skye, and oh, man, it's just gorgeous riding up there, right? Like it's funny, yeah. Like I was chatting to my mum because my mum was born in Scotland, and she was like, oh, like like don't expect much, and I was like, oh, okay, like I'm sure this is gonna be great. It's just
Beautiful up
there's
there.
nothing like Scotland out there. I think
Beautiful.
it's gorgeous, man. Yeah.
Some of it, it's what I always say to people, and one of the great things that I think about this podcast. It's not just about people that's done an incredible adventure like you. It might be someone who lives on Skye, who
Mm,
goes to work on his bike,
mm.
and who sees, let's be honest, some of those views, you can't even believe they're real.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
first look at it, you think, it doesn't even, you can't, it's not real. It's
Nah,
just,
it's like the moodiness and just,
yeah,
it's just got
the
such an
vibe. It's
intense
just that,
vibe. Yeah.
isn't it? It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. I took this one photo. It was on the way out to Skye. Like I just pulled over because it was just like, oh, this looks ridiculous. And I took a photo of it. And like I was looking back on it the other day. I think it's got to be the best photo I've taken on my entire trip, like of a landscape, like no
Mm.
doubt about it. Yeah.
But you're gonna have to put it on the British motorcycling group.
Right. Yeah.
Just get it on there.
That's the thing. Maybe I shouldn't have done this whole massive trip. Maybe I should just hung out in Scotland. No, but it
Yeah,
is. It's
here I
gorgeous.
am in Tajikistan.
Yeah, yeah. But nah, I mean, it's been cool going up there. I really want to spend a bit more time up there. My granddad was a lighthouse keeper, and so he dotted around a whole bunch of different places in Scotland, and kind
Oh,
of keen to go out and see some of these old lighthouses that he used to work on, and
yeah,
quite cool at some point.
that's
Um,
amazing.
But I think from here, I'm looking for a job now.
Yeah.
Eva's, being she's already sorted herself out. She's already got a job, She started earlier this week, so she's doing awesome. For
Oh,
me, I'm maybe a little more relaxed about it, so I think I'm going to go down to Spain and maybe do some rock climbing. While I just kind of wait for that to sort itself out. It's a little bit cheaper down there as well, which is good. So yeah, that's kind of it. That's where we're at. Yeah.
amazing. It's been, just talking to you. You do inspire me. Honestly, you do. Honestly, you do. And I know that people listening to it will be inspired. This is one of the benefits, I think, because I listen to podcasts all the time, and I remember somebody once saying to me that one of the great ways to learn something is to play it as you fall asleep, and apparently your brain remembers it.
Mhm.
And I never did it. So, but I do listen to podcasts as I go to sleep, and all the time. I just put a podcast on, and I put a 20-minute timer or a half-hour timer, and I always fall asleep before the timer goes off, and
Mhm.
that's no indication of how boring the podcast is. It just relaxes me. It's just nice. And I mentioned earlier that I live in Yorkshire, and I drive down to London and southeast a lot. And those 4.5 hour, 5 hour drives fly by listening to podcasts.
Mhm.
And I think other people do the same, and listening to it because they're interested in it. And then they will, think, wow, this guy and his girlfriend went and did this. Listen to what they've observed, they've experienced, and you know, but like I was saying earlier, just that memory. I think we should do it, and so many people will have been inspired. And I'm sure people will in future podcasts, because I know I've spoken to them, like I did you, just to arrange this, and they say, some of them it's as simple as, oh, I watched Long Way Down, and
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I thought from then on I'm going to do it.
That was us, mate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
too. I did. I thought I'm never going to subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Apple TV, but I
Yeah.
wanted to watch all the others because they do inspire me. And the fact they've got a team of 20 and £4 million budget, don't matter.
No, it doesn't, mate. It
To
doesn't.
me,
Like,
it's they did it and you can do it your own way.
I think I've met a lot of people on the road that have had some really negative things to say about that show, and I
Yeah, me
just
too.
think at the end of the day, like you're there, you're on your motorcycle, and like come on, man. Like when like them doing it when they did it, it was I feel like probably a lot harder than what it is now. Like you didn't have blooming Google Maps on your phone. Like, I just
No,
anyone
no.
that wants to take something away from somebody else,
2004, wasn't it, the first one? Something like that.
you're right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very different.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. I was inspired by it, and I've been inspired by other people who've done things, and thought, you know what, I might not do the same thing, but it certainly inspires me to think. I think what it is, it's not just inspires, it sort of prompts something in you that makes you think, you know what, I don't want to be that person wishing I'd done it.
Yep. Yeah, I totally opens your mind up to the idea of doing it, and I agree. Like I remember so vividly watching The Long Way Round with like me and like two mates that we lived in the same flat. We'd go riding every weekend. It was kind of our thing, uh,
Mm.
and I've never been able to let go of the idea from that point. And like God, it was really interesting. Like one of these houses that we went to, I just remember like so it was this one in Dagestan where they invited us in, and like he had this like young family, and like the mother wasn't too keen on us. Like I think she was a little bit like, who are these guys? But there were these two girls, probably like 11 and 13 or around that age, and I remember them watching Eva, like this girl on this motorbike, and you could just see the cogs turning. Like I think, like the world just got a little bit bigger for them in that moment maybe, and like it's exactly the same thing for, when we watch The Long Way Around, like you think, oh my God, like this is actually something that I could do, the power of suggestion, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, like it's totally one of the reasons we went out and did this trip. But like as you say, like it doesn't need to be a huge trip. I mean, I think like jumping on a motorcycle, whether it be going down to the shops or going on a weekend trip with mates, like it's super enriching, and it's like such a great way to travel as well.
Oh,
You're in the environment as opposed to being in a metal box, separated from it. You
yeah.
really feel the landscape, and
Yeah. No,
but I would
absolutely.
just think, yeah. So.
No, no, go on. Sorry.
Oh no, yeah, all good. But I was just gonna say like I just think if anyone's sitting there thinking like that they would maybe like to do it, a trip like this, like first of all, like I would say it is expensive, but it's not as expensive as you would think. I mean, we had friends that came over to Europe and did basically like a month traveling around staying in Airbnbs and all that. And like they spent, the same amount of money doing that trip as we spent doing a 6 month motorcycle trip.
Yeah.
You know, like when you get out to these regions of the world, they're a lot cheaper. You're not staying in hotels most nights.
Mm.
Uh, and it's not that, I mean, like, like this, we had so many things go wrong on this trip, so many things that like we could have been like, all right, throw in the towel, but they're just not problems because the people that are that are around you will help you get back up on your feet again. And yeah, it's really nice having sort of like offered ourselves up to, I guess, like the mercy of the world in a wee bit, and just like found that it's actually the super positive place and that people are really nice. And yeah, so if you're thinking about it, just do it. Honestly, like you won't regret it. Like as you say, like you build memories for life. Yeah.
No, absolutely. There's certain questions that we think about asking, but you've sort of answered all that anyway, just organically. And I knew that this would happen, as soon as we met, and you can see that would. Um, I think the only thing I would go back on as well is when you mentioned about those young girls seeing Eva and seeing how big the world is through seeing a girl do this,
Mm.
whereas possibly in their culture that's not something that you would necessarily aspire to do. Reminds me of listening to a podcast recently from Bruce from Teapot One, who I listen to a lot, a Scottish guy. He's from Aberdeen, and his last podcast, which I've just been listening to, was with Rio from the Gladiators, who used to be in the original Gladiators show, which is, if you haven't seen it, because you're a lot younger than me, was these really, really fit people doing this gladiator challenge in a big, like, nets and balancing and fighting and amazing Saturday night TV back in the day.
Mm.
And she's a black lady who was riding with a group of white guys, and remembering she was out there filming the South African version of Gladiator, and she very clearly remembers. I remember her just saying just a few days ago that she was riding, and all these little kids were running after her and saying, do a wheelie," and shouting and excited to see, strangers riding through on these massive motorbikes they might have never seen before. She says it was so lovely. She says, and then there's like these little girls came up and excited, thinking, I don't know, they don't know what they're expecting, but I assume they're going to expect to see a white guy.
Yeah.
Took my helmet off, and I lifted my visor to look at them. And she says, I'll never forget the look on the face, because they saw someone who's not only a woman, but a black woman. And they were like, she says, and I pray that that look on their face will stay with them, and that memory, that possibility, it really moving. I thought, you know what?
Mm.
Absolutely. That these little girls don't see these rich white men and think, oh, that's amazing. Oh, wow. But I'll go back to my village. I can never be that. But actually, they saw this woman from a working class background who's black like them, doing the same thing as these other people. And the impact, hopefully, the positive impact it has on them will be very similar to those little girls seeing Eva and thinking, anything, I can do anything.
Yeah, I mean, who can say how it will affect their lives? But I do. I just remember, I remember the way that they were looking at her, and yeah, it was pretty beautiful, man. It was pretty
Yeah.
beautiful, and that is that's a really lovely story as well.
Yeah.
And
It's
yeah,
nice. It's great that these little tiny things have such a massive impact. And I think for you guys, you probably, although you're clearly a very, very nice and very perceptive person, you maybe also miss some of the positivity that you spread when you go in there, because they'll meet you. And just like you're telling me all these lovely stories about these lovely people that would do so much to help you and go out of their way and, sit and get drunk with you and feed you and house you. Well, they see that positivity in you as well. So, it's absolutely the most valuable thing for me that wherever we go, whether we go on a cruise or whether we go on a bike or in the car, however we go, when we meet people, if we are a positive impact on their lives, then that helps us all get along in this world better.
Hmm.
And they'll remember you just like you remember them. And
Oh, well, I hope so.
I'm sure they
I
will.
mean, we've made a lot of friends on the road, and yeah, like, but yeah, it's kind of funny that, eh? It's a really good point, and I couldn't agree more. But
Yeah.
I just feel super lucky to. I think going into this, like, you have a perception or an idea of what you think, it will be like. Everyone, you spend 4 years thinking about this and planning it, um, I think, like, I always kind of thought that, like, people out there in the world, like 99% of people are good, and like there's, it doesn't matter where you go, there's always a
Yeah.
few. Yeah. But and it's just true, man. It's just true. We all have the same hopes, the same desires, the same dreams, like none of that changes with ethnicity, with race, with
No.
culture, it's all the same. We all love our kids. We all want to,
Yeah.
put food on the table and
That's
have
all we want, innit?
security.
Let's be honest. That's all we want. To live
Yeah.
happily, healthily, and peacefully. That's what most people in this world just want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And most people are just, they just spend their lives working towards that, being as nice to everyone around them as they possibly can. So, yeah.
Well, you know what, Richard, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. And all the questions, as I said, about future aspirations, ideas, and stuff, you just organically come over with, and you're a really nice guy, and I'm so pleased that you've had this experience, both you and Eva. And I'm sure you will inspire other people. You certainly have me, definitely. So, I would say if you want to share, if you've got any socials or anything like that, if you want to point people in the direction, then this is your opportunity to do so. Also, if you have, I'll put links to them on the podcasts as well, so people can see and follow you. Um, just sometimes it might be nice that people and friends will be like, "Oh wow, have we seen this?" Richard
Yeah,
told us
man.
all about his trip. He never mentioned that.
Yeah, I'll definitely share that to a few people I know. If people do want to, I mean, yeah, if people want to see a bit more about the trip, we're not huge social media people, but we do have an Instagram that we've just sort of like kept updated with what we're up to. So it's at 2somewhereandbeyond, and two is like the number two, so 2somewhereandbeyond. Yeah, but thank you very much for having me on, Ian. It's been awesome to actually just sit here and like I guess relive a lot of the experiences as well. It's been
Yeah,
really nice for me, and yeah, really appreciate the conversation.
yeah, you too, mate. Absolutely. So keep in touch. Any future adventures, let us know. Share stuff on the British Motorcycling Group. It's really nice to see that people are active on there. And if no other way, the reason we first started wanting to do these podcasts was simply that people in the group could get to know each other. It'd be a really nice way for when you're in these groups. Sometimes you're in groups of thousands of people, and you
Mhm.
don't really know them unless you might get contact with two or three. It's a bit like you with the Yamaha groups and stuff. You're in contact because you go and buy a lemon off them or whatever. But it's nice to be able to know a bit of information about these other people through having a podcast guest from the group. And it's sort of grown into people who were not in the group, but that have got so much to offer it. And so we get to know so much about each other in that way. So yeah, stay active on there, share away. Please let us know when you're on your next adventure, and also congratulate Eva on her part in that, which sounds like made it such a very, very more exciting adventure than it might have been if you were just on your own.
Yeah, I will, man. I'll pass that on.
Yeah,
And
definitely. All right, mate. All the best. It's been wonderful to talk to you, and we'll speak to you soon.
awesome, mate. Cheers. Thank you.
You're welcome.